All right, so without much delay, let's get started on to the session. So a couple of ground rules when we start the session. So the first is, if you're able to, if at least one person is able to hear what I'm saying, I would assume that the problem is not with my voice and the problem is with your side. But obviously, being in India, a lot of times, there are internet getting disconnected at my end. So that could be a possible problem. Last time we did have a problem like that. So in case you are not able to hear me for, let's say, 30 seconds, a minute or so, and everyone else is complaining, don't worry, I will come back. Okay. And I probably am just trying to log in. So just hang on for another minute or so in case it gets cut out. All right. The other thing over here is there are two types of boxes. If you see, there is a Q&A box, and then there is another one called chat. So what you have been using is the chat window. So this is the one that I'm typing in hello. So you may want to just, use this for normal chit chat. There is another one called Q&A. You might see that option, in the menu. So that particular one we will be using if you have a specific question. So if there is any specific question that you would like me to answer, I'll be going through that Q&A box, all the questions at the end of the session. All right. I won't be doing that earlier than that. Okay. And yeah, I think that's pretty much what I had in terms of rules. The agenda, I'm going to go through, I'm going to keep a top 10 format. So I'm going to talk about the top 10 mistakes that Indian students make while preparing for the GMAT. Now, there are two reasons why I picked, Indian students. So one is, why I picked Indian students, because a majority of students that I've worked with have predominantly been Indians. But I've also had the opportunity to work with people from other cultures, from other countries, including Europeans and Americans. So I see that Indians tend to think a little differently. And a lot of it has to do with cultural background. A lot of it has to do with the way we have been taught things when we were in school and college. So in some sense, we kind of carry forward all those habits onto the GMAT test as well. Right? So I'll be talking about what are the issues Indians usually have. And along with that, the reason I picked a top 10 format is that, it's a nice number. So at any given point, how much progress we have made. Right. So I'm point number 4, I'm at point number 6, I'm at point number 8. So, okay, 10 things is, a very nice, digestible number. Right. So with that, just to introduce myself, my name is Arun. Quick background. So people ask me, where I'm from. So I'm from Tamil Nadu. That's where, like my parents are Tamil, right? So by that definition, I'm a Tamil. But I grew up in Gujarat. I grew up in a city called Baroda. So in case you've heard of Baroda, Vadodara, so there is a lot of Guju in me. I think more than Tamil, I probably identify myself more as a Gujarati. And then, after I completed my schooling, I did my college, I even started working. My first job was in Baroda. So I finally, took the plunge. I came over to Bangalore because a lot of my friends were in Bangalore and they were telling me that, okay, so I hope, I don't know, I just got logged off for a minute. So, so as I was saying, I came over to Gujarat. I ended up, spending time. So I came to Bangalore. I ended up spending the initial few years working in a software job, right? And then I quickly moved on to a project manager, delivery manager role. So that's what I was doing. So 10 years of my life, I used to teach at, I used to work in the IT sector in Bangalore. But here is something else that happened. So all along, I also, had a passion for teaching. So what used to happen is I used to teach, part-time. and I would be working 9 to 5, but evenings I used to teach, weekends I used to teach. And somehow, teaching was just this passion I could never get rid of, right? So over a period of time, so people ask me, right, how did the name CrackVerbal come into being? So what used to happen is I used to teach both quant and verbal. But after a point, what happened, more or less, I started teaching verbal because apparently it was easier to find a quant faculty, but it was hard to find a verbal faculty. So they just started giving me verbal classes. One day I decided to say enough of this. So way back about 10 years ago, I said, I'm going to stop teaching. Those times, pagalguy.com was a very popular forum. So I said, anyways, I'm going to give free advice. So, why don't we meet at a place? And, those days, it was more face-to-face meetings, right? They were still in vogue. So I said, let's meet up and I will teach you how to crack verbal on the GMAT, right? That's how the thread was. The thread was that I'm going to teach you how to crack verbal on the GMAT. And before you realized, the name kind of stuck on. So people started saying crack verbal, right? So that's the term that they use. So when I started a company in 2006, I named it CrackVerbal. So that's really the history, though, as most of you know, we also have an awesome quant component. I'm a professional GMAT tutor, so obviously to say that I have a 99 percentile is not something. Very honestly, I mean, see, I always think that teachers getting a high score is not like a big deal, right? I mean, this is my job. But what is more important is for the teacher to be able to produce the same kind of results in students. I think that's really the challenge, right? So we have had students, consistently scoring very high on the GMAT, and that gives me a sense of comfort, a sense of confidence that what we have been teaching, for the last decade has been techniques that actually work on the GMAT. So just a random fact about me. So I've spent now almost 17 years, 16 years teaching, and reading comprehension was the first subject that I ever taught. And the story behind it is, it's not that I have an advanced degree in reading comprehension or I have a natural aptitude. The faculty for reading comprehension did not turn up. And this is way back, I was teaching for the CAT at a place called IMS. And the center manager called me and said, hey, can you take reading comprehension? And that's really how I got into test prep. So before that, I didn't know that these are things that can be taught. I always felt that you have a natural instinct, a natural ability, and that's how you do it. So I'm going to be talking about that as well. That's pretty much my introduction. Now I'm going to, in terms of asking you your introduction, I just wanted to know one thing. Let me just ask this question over here. Just once again, I'm just trying to see how to share the. Otherwise, let's do this. Why don't we actually put it in the chat window itself? So let me ask you this question. When are you planning to take the GMAT? So do you have any dates? When you're planning, you can just type it on the chat window. Okay, 23rd December. All right. Jan 25th, 3-4 months. All right. Last week of December, Feb. 6th December, Praveen's time is Jagjit, all the questions I'll be answering in some time, okay? So I won't be answering the questions now. I'll be answering it a little later. Okay, looking for Jan. Okay, got it. Cool. So Here is another question for you. So just wanted to understand, sorry, I missed out a T. So the question is, are you a CrackVerbal student? So just wanted to know. So we have, you can just, Shailesh, Gurinder, you can just put it into the poll, okay? 20 of you still remaining. Just go ahead and type something into the poll. Not a question for which you need to think a lot. Just wanting to get an idea of the mix of students that we have today so that I can tailor my, message accordingly so that I could, so I think I got a sense, I think I have a sense of where you guys are from, right? So that's fine. All right, good. All right, so let's get started with a few free resources. Before that, in case you have not logged in already, you can look up some free videos on the GMAT online trial course. So the link is there, gmatonline.crackverbal.com. So you can just go ahead and type it into your URL. We also have, so in case you have already filled it out, you probably have an email, so you don't need to log in again. You can just go ahead and click. It should be a mail from either Monica or Nirali. We also have a bunch of videos on our YouTube channel. So that's another thing that I would recommend that you guys go and have a look at. So the YouTube channel essentially not just talks about the OG explanations, but it also has a lot of videos on the whole MBA application process. So you might want to check on that. We are currently testing out GMAT on the go. It's an online testing platform that we have created. So if you'll go ahead, take it for a spin. In case you have any feedback or comments, please mail us and we'd be glad to look into it. It's still work in progress. But we have actually ported all the official GMAT questions that are not found on the OG or the verbal review onto this platform. And finally, CrackVerbal students might be familiar with this, our online forum. So in case you have a question or a query, go ahead and post it over here. One of our experts will have a look at it and respond to your thread. All right. Good. So let's get started with the main agenda, the top 10 mistakes. I'm just going to go one by one through the rules, right? And as I said, I'll be taking the questions towards the end. So in case you have questions, you can just keep that. So the first one is the problem that I feel is, GMAT is a test, like, the way Indians look at it, okay? Akhil, all these things are available. You can just search for it, okay? So I will not be focusing on the chat window now, okay? So the first thing is, Indians, what happens is we tend to look at it saying, there seems to be this graph, okay, of X and Y axis, right? And what we believe is we will be able to, the more we study, okay? So it's almost like this, right? The more we study. So if I were to take preparation and time as the two axes, so this is prep, and let's say this is the time, we tend to believe that this is a linear curve. We believe that the more I study, the more I mug up, the more I tend to remember the formula, the better I will be in terms of my preparation. Okay. This is the biggest fallacy. And every time you sit down to study, just ask yourself, right? Let's take quant. How many formulas do you really have in quant? Think about it. If you were to look at arithmetic, algebra, geometry, right? You will realize that all three of them put together, you may not have more than, let's say, 300 formulas, right, at tops. If I were to study for, let's say, a month, which is 30 days, and if I were to cover 10 formulas a day, that means I'll be able to cover this 300 formulas in 1 month. right? That's all it takes. All I need to do is take that formula, solve a simple question based on that formula, and understand how it works. Speed is equal to distance upon time. Area of a rectangle is length into breadth. So all these are formulas, correct? So my question to you, if you mug up all these 300 formulas, will you be able to get a perfect 51 in quant? Right? So you will realize that, yeah, obviously, it's not going to work that way. You may not get a perfect 51. That is it, yeah. You may not get a perfect 51 in quant because you realize that this is not based on remembering formulas alone. By the same token, if you see the whole idea that so this is how it's going to really go. Sorry, I think it's. So this is how it really goes, right? What happens, initially you will see an improvement, then it becomes like this. If you are hitting a plateau on the GMAT, if your scores are not going up, if you are stuck at a verbal 20, 25, 30, or even a verbal 35, it tells me that you probably are looking at GMAT as something where, knowledge is more important. I'll tell you, knowledge is not as important as you think it is, right? So that is why what happens, I have students who come and tell me, I have completed so-and-so book, I have solved 100 questions, I have solved 200 questions, correct? But tell me, if 300 formulas in quant are not going to help you get a 51 in quant, what makes you think mugging up sentence correction rules will get you a 51 in verbal, right? So first thing is, stop thinking of this as a test of just remembering things. I'll tell you, all that you need to know on the GMAT as far as formulas are concerned can be done in 2 to 3 days. That's it. 2 days is all that it requires for you to know whatever you need to know in order to do well on the GMAT, right? So if you are at this delta, if you are facing this problem right now, then I can tell you almost with certainty that your problem is you're looking at the test in a way that, I'll just, kind of finish this formula or that formula. Get away from this whole formula-based approach, right? Now, what I'm going to say now is the opposite of what I just told you, okay? And that is, GMAT is not a test of, if it's a test of this, it's not a test of intelligence alone, correct? So the other extreme of the spectrum is, don't think of it this way, that GMAT is a test where, you have this natural aptitude, right? And a person comes in, takes the GMAT and ends up scoring, a great score. Here is a classic question that I have. If I were to take a room full of smart people, and this is the question that I ask my students in the class also, if you have 100 smart people in the room, right, and I give a really tough 800 level GMAT question, how many of you do you think would really be able to solve it? Okay. So what I would say is, from a perspective of the GMAT, probably 5 or 10 people would be able to solve a really tough 800 level GMAT question, correct? That's why it is such a tough question. But if I were to look at it from a probability perspective, instead of a room full of smart humans, if I were to put a room full of monkeys, right, theoretically at least, 20 of those monkeys would get the right answer choice, right? Why? Because monkeys don't think. Monkeys just blindly press a number between, or press a letter between A and D. So why is it that smart humans are performing poorer than monkeys? The reason is that smart humans fall into trap. Okay, there are plenty of traps, there are plenty of things that you need to understand from a perspective of the skills involved. So anyone who tells that GMAT is a test purely of skills is incorrect. Sorry, purely of intelligence is incorrect. GMAT is a test of skills, right? And one of the things is to think of traps like the GMAT test setter. So whenever I look at a question, I always ask myself, if I were to be setting this question, how would I trap people? How would I trick people? How would I confuse people, right? So let me give you a very simple example of how, GMAT always, and GMAT, you will realize over a period of time that it works in a very standard classic pattern, correct? So what will happen over there is, for example, let's take something like sentence correction, correct? So sentence correction, you will be what perhaps I would say sounds right, correct? And what is correct. Now, GMAT knows that a smart guy will pick something that sounds right to him, right? Something that just makes sense, something just sounds right. So let me give you an example, right? So if I were to say, a whole batch of students at CrackVerbal are planning to take the test in Jan. Correct? Now, what happens for someone who has a feel of English? He probably is going to read this statement and say, you know what, it makes sense. Why? Because you have a whole batch of students, right, who are going to be doing this. Correct? By the way, if someone is asking a question on the chat window, the others are please feel free to respond to him. Okay. So just to kind of, right? So the whole idea is that when I look at it from a GMAT perspective, I'm going to look at it and say, are planning or is planning, correct? So the key over here is what sounds right is are planning, but what is technically right is planning. A whole lot of students is planning. A whole batch of students is planning. So what you'll realize is that just being technically correct, okay, is sometimes important, and GMAT knows that, and GMAT is going to set these traps for you. Okay, there is another trap that GMAT sets for you. So, for example, if you take something like critical reasoning, right? GMAT will set a trap for you where it will give you this causation correlation, correct? So what you'll have to ask yourself is, so I've had students in my experience who have taken the GMAT diagnostic test. They ended up with a 730, 740 kind of score, right? And they went on to do very well. But there is a very minuscule percentage of people. In fact, I could probably count on my fingers the number of people who actually ended up like that. And then I'm talking about in my career of the last 10, 15 years, right? Naturally gifted people. You do not need to compete with them, right? Tell them, okay, you get a 780 on the GMAT, great, congratulations, right? For me, I have to make sure that I start thinking and look at what are the skills that are required for me to do well. And as I said, always ask yourself, if I were the GMAT test setter, what would I do to confuse the students, right? That's a question that you probably need to keep asking yourself at each step. That will make you think, that will push you, right? That will make you look at other options, other alternatives. Is it too good to be true? If it is too good to be true, perhaps it is not true. Maybe there is some other catch to it, correct? So you have to kind of dig deep into that, all right? Third one. So this is something that I feel students tend not to worry too much, correct? And they tend to, look at it and say, hey, is this something that, like the food for thought that I usually give is, I would rather get a question wrong in 30 seconds than to get it right in 5 minutes. See, what happens over here is the human brain likes instant gratification, correct? So when you're on question number 7, okay, and let us say that seems to be a tough question in CR, right? So what happens in question number 7 in CR is I say, you know what, it's okay, let me take a little bit more time because, I will make up for it in sentence correction, right? I'll make up for it in some RC passage, okay? Or I make up for it in another CR question, right? Then what happens, the same problem happens in question number 11. The same problem happens on question number 13. Same problem happens on question number 15. Same problem happens on question number 20. Same problem happens on question number 23. You get the drift. By the time you hit question number 35, you see you're run out of time. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to get off this instant gratification mode, okay, and you have to force yourself, okay, to actually go ahead and commit to an answer, right? So now I'll explain to you what I mean by that, okay? This is one suggestion that I give students, right? How to manage time. So let's say there are 75 minutes, okay? This 75 minutes can be broken up. So don't think of GMAT as one test of 75 minutes, okay? Think of it as 5 mini tests, okay? 5 small tests, each one of 15 minutes. So now it's a lot easier for me to manage 15 minutes because 15 minutes is a, slightly smaller chunk for me to manage. Now what I will do is I will solve in quant, I will solve 8 questions in each of these 15-minute chunks. And in verbal, I will be solving 7 questions in each of these 15-minute chunks, correct? So if you look at it, if I'm in verbal, for example, right? End of 15 minutes, I'm on question number 8. End of 30 minutes, I'm on question number, so basically into 2 plus 1. So I'm on question number 15, I'm on question number 22, I'm on question number 36, I'm on question number 41, right? Obviously, you need to complete question number 41 at the end of 75 minutes, but very manageable. So what I will do is, even in my practice, I'm going to take a chunk of 7 questions, and I'm going to give myself 15 minutes. So what I need to do is I need to manage my time very well in this 15 minutes. And if I'm able to repeat that 5 times, I will be able to manage my score that time on the GMAT, right? Now, there is this whole idea that, I have to get the first 15 questions right or first 20 questions right. I think is just a lot of bull crap. Here is the deal. If you're so smart that you can get the first 15 questions right, then why don't you get the rest of the questions right? Why don't you get all 41 questions right? If you're smart enough to get the first 15 questions, then you should be smart enough to get all the questions right. Correct? See, what you will realize over here is that, people who usually make these statements saying that, oh, get the first 10 questions right or first 15 questions right, there is a fundamental flaw. The fundamental flaw being, there is no way on the GMAT to know whether I'm getting that question right or wrong. Correct? I solved that question. I thought it is right. But whether it's actual right or wrong, it is not in my hands. Correct? So, I'll tell you why the underlying fallacy is. The underlying fallacy is somewhere we end up believing in this thing. We believe that there is, again, I always like to put things in a graphical manner, okay? There is accuracy and there is time. We again believe that there is a linear relationship between accuracy and time, which means giving more time to a question will somehow improve the accuracy of that question. Here is a simple trick that you can try at home. Next time what you do, pick a set of 20 questions that you would have solved, okay? Then what you do is you go ahead and you kind of, just go ahead and, one second, I'm just trying to, I'm not able to, okay. So go ahead and try to give yourself, so let's say the 20 questions you do in, let's say, 40 minutes, okay? Now what you do not look at the answers, all right? So you solve 20 questions, given yourself 40 minutes, do not look at the answers, give yourself infinite time. In other words, give yourself hours if required. Go back to those 20 questions and ask yourself, in how many questions would I actually end up changing my answer? You will be surprised that out of the 20 questions, you would not make changes in more than 2 or 3 questions max. Correct? Then why is it that we get this feeling that more time helps? See, it's just the way the brain works. The brain likes comfort. Correct? The brain likes the fact that, it's like one of those things. When you go to a shop, you don't necessarily do a spot purchase, right? You'll usually say, Bhaiya, keep it aside, I'll come back and look at it later. Why do you do that? You do that because you want to give yourself enough time, okay, to really let the thought settle in. On the GMAT, unfortunately, we cannot afford that. Okay, on the GMAT, we have to mark and move on. So you have to give yourself a cutoff time. I don't know what that cutoff time is. So there are two types of guessing if you were to really look at it, right? The first kind of guessing is what I would call as, a blind guess, right? So it could either be a blind guess, and we'll be talking about guessing again, but just to let you know, or it could be an educated guess. Blind guess, you don't take any time. Educated guess, you're typically between the last two answer options. So you need to ask yourself, am I making a blind guess over here? If I'm making a blind guess, don't spend time. See, if you say that I'm going to guess after 2 minutes, you're not really guessing. After 2 minutes, you're giving up. There is a difference between guessing and giving up, right? So tell, from next time onwards, tell, I gave up on this question. Don't say I guessed on this question. If you're guessing it, it means that it is in the first 20 seconds or first 30 seconds. The second could be an educated guess. What happens over here is the law of diminishing return kicks in, correct? So after a point, spending more time on a question is not going to help. So you need to have an internal cutoff, right? So that internal cutoff is, after a point, I'm not going to get into an analysis paralysis mode. I'm just going to go ahead and guess that question, right? Blind guess, as I said, less than 30 seconds. When do you use blind guesses? I will use a blind guess when I'm running out of time. I'm supposed to be on question number 23, but I'm on question number 20. So what I will do in my blind guessing strategy, I will try to keep a particular question type, maybe inference questions in reading comprehension, or maybe a very tough, let's say, bold-faced question in CR. The moment I see it, I will just say, I'm just going to mark a random answer and move on. Okay, that could be a strategy that you have. Or you could say that, at some point, I'm not going to waste too much time in the last two answer choices. I need to make sure that I pick an answer and move on. Correct? So, as I said, the question to ask your brain is not, can I solve this question? See, if you ask this question to your brain takes offense, right? Your brain says, look, you kidding me? I'm smart, right? I can solve this question. But when you ask your brain the right question, which is, can I solve this question in under 2 minutes, you will realize that your brain is a lot more rational. It's a lot more agreeable. It'll say, you know what, under 2 minutes, I don't think this is going to happen. Let's just mark and move on. Okay, so it's very important that you have a very clear time management in your mind. People who do not manage time well on the GMAT will not be able to score high. Correct? So just to reiterate what I said, Indians typically end up doing these things. First, they tend to depend a lot on the formulas, which is what I mentioned as point number one. Point number two, I also said that, you also need to use a little bit of your intelligence, so to speak, which is avoiding the common traps that GMAT has set for you. The third thing is more in terms of managing your time, right? So you need to make sure that you manage your time very well on the GMAT. Okay, so just a quick point over here. Just wanted to understand. I see that quite people posting questions over here. I already mentioned to you, Venkat Kishore, Niloy, and all of these. When you have a question, just put it in the Q&A option over here, right? So you see a Q&A option. Just put that so that I can get to it when I get on to answering towards the end. Okay, now on this part, when I was telling you about educated guesses, right? Now, what has really happened is we tend to not be very good at our ability to let go, right? And I'm going to sound like a psychiatrist over here, but on the GMAT, I've seen very good students, right? My students who ended up messing up the GMAT because of their ego. Okay, I'll use the word ego. The reason being that, they looked at a question and they said, I have been practicing reading comprehension for the last 3 months. okay? And or, this inference question, I have a very clear strategy that I had before the test. How could I get it wrong? Or it could be in quant for that matter, right? When I look at a time, speed, distance, those time, speed, distance is my forte. I should be nailing it. And what happens when we get this ego, we tend to not make a guess. In fact, I'll tell you, Indians in general are very uncomfortable making a guess, right? Because right from childhood, you think about it, what did your teacher tell you? Your teacher told you that, look, if you don't know, don't tell, okay? Just tell if you know what you're sure. You couldn't go to a Viva, correct? And you couldn't tell the teacher that, well, I really don't know, but if I think it should be this answer, right? So because of that, what has happened is we live in this world where things are either right or wrong, 0 or 1, yes or no, black or white. It's always very binary. Okay. On the GMAT, we have to start, living in this gray area. Okay. This gray area where things may not be very sure. We are 80% confident, right? So here is a food for thought that I have, and I want you to think about it. Okay. Let me just write it down. If you are 100% sure, then you're probably wasting your time. On the GMAT, learn to be 80% sure. What do I mean by 80% sure or 90% sure, 95% sure? See, again, you understand these numbers are subjective, right? What is 80% to me could be another number for you. But the point is that, you have to understand that I've seen students doing this, right? They get the answer, but they go back and try to double check it. They will go back and they will try to, verify, they will try to see if there are other errors in that sentence that they can spot. Okay. In critical reasoning, they know C is the answer. They will try to use negation. Correct. See, the whole idea is this. Okay. If you're spending 100%, if you're 100% sure, it means you're spent extra time validating that answer to be sure. GMAT as a test is designed to make you uncomfortable. It's designed that the moment you mark C and you click on submit and confirm and go to the next question, you should always have this lingering feeling in your heart saying, "Arey, maybe not." See, the idea is, and I've had students come back to me and say, "Arun, when I'm between the last two answer options, correct? I don't know what to do. And, that's where I'm spending the maximum time." Excellent. You have already identified the area where you're spending most time. Correct? So my take is usually spending more time is actually a sign that you're just trying to be extra cautious. Stop being extra cautious. Right? And how do you develop this ability? You develop this ability by taking tests, because in practice, you'll realize your confidence is very high. So I've had students who have come and told me that, "Arun, when I'm practicing questions from OG, I'm able to guess easily. But the same thing when it comes on the test, I somehow feel myself being very, jittery about picking a answer option." So take more tests, time yourself. If you see the previous point that we had on timing, time yourself, and, with time, you should be able to get the hang of when to persevere and when to let go. Now, one side point that I usually get at this is, "Arun, when I'm between the last two answer options, I always end up picking the wrong answer." Correct? I've had a lot of students come back and tell me. So if you can just put on your on the chat window, correct? Anyone of you face a similar problem that you're between the last two answer options, you always pick the wrong one? Excellent. Most of the times, 75%, always? Okay, great. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to give you a solution that will solve the problem in under 10 seconds. Okay. Next time that you are between the last two answer options, and let's say you are between C for Charlie and E for Echo. Okay. You want to pick C for Charlie, go to C for Charlie, but then pick E for Echo. So what I'm saying is, pick the opposite answer choice than from what you would have otherwise picked. So now, in one stroke, your problem would get solved, right? That's all you need to do, pick the other answer option. Okay, so at this point, you probably realize that, look, it's something else going on, right? It cannot be so easy. Okay, so here is what happens. This is called Murphy's Law, right? You would have heard of Murphy's Law. When you're standing in a line, there is a line next to you that is going a little faster. What do? We try to step out of our line, join the other one. And guess what happens? That line now starts moving slowly, or that guy goes out for lunch, correct? And you feel so miserable that someone who came later than you is actually getting his turn before you, right? So Murphy's Law actually is in a lot of things in life. It is based on this principle. The principle is we tend to remember the times when it did not work. We tend to be forgetful of the time that it works. So I will always remember the time when I went through pain. I will not remember the time when I got pleasure, correct? So because of that, what happens if you solve 10 questions, let's say you're between the last two answer options, let's say answer option A and answer option C, okay? Now, what happens is that, let's say you're between C and D, okay? Let us say that in option 1, you pick the right answer choice C. And in option 2, you pick the wrong answer option B, okay? Wrong answer option E, okay? Now, what happens when you pick the right answer option C, okay? Though you were between the last two answer options, you know what you tell yourself? I was just looking at E. I mean, I knew C was the right answer choice. I was kind of confident, but I just looked at C, yeah, but I was clear C was the right answer. But the same thing when it happens and you pick up the wrong answer choice E, okay, here's what you want to tell yourself. Arey, I knew C was the right answer choice, silly mistake, I don't know why I picked D. So we always tend to remember the scenarios when things did not work as opposed to scenarios where it worked. Okay, so stop telling yourself that lie. Okay, it's not true that you end up getting it wrong all the time. Okay, so coming on to the fifth one, the brute force approach. Now, again, this brute force approach is a very nice, it's something that I've seen in a lot of students, right? See, what happens, if I were to go back to the time that I was in school, or if I were to go back to the time I was in college, and I don't know how it was with you guys, okay? But what really happened was the guy who scored the most, okay, ended up practicing the most. The guy who scored the most was the guy who would hit the books for 12 hours, 14 hours a day. I remember the guy who was my topper. He's a good friend of mine, even now. He went to IIT Bombay. Very, very smart guy. Okay, I'm not going to take anything away from that. I remember he used to study for 14 hours in 12th standard, right? I mean, I could never imagine myself sitting and studying for so long. So when he got the mark that he got, I always justified to myself that, if I had studied more, no, I would have got higher marks. Now what happens? We take the same approach onto the GMAT. What we tell ourselves is that, you know what, to score high on the GMAT, no, I just need to practice. I just need to do 500 questions, 5,000 questions, or 50,000 questions, right? Now, what happens is there are two problems that happen, if you were to have this technique, correct? The first problem is if you have a fundamentally flawed approach, correct? Then what happens? More practice, cements your flaws. Which means, let us say that you have to be running towards Delhi, but you're running towards Hyderabad, correct? Let's say you're in Bhopal, right? You have to go towards Delhi, but you're going towards Hyderabad. What more practice will do is it will help you run faster in the wrong direction. You're supposed to go to Delhi, but you're going towards Hyderabad. But you know what? With more practice, you're going faster and faster towards Hyderabad, okay? Not towards Delhi. So that's the problem when you just, practice like a boatload of questions. That's my first big problem. The second problem over here is that, many times because we have so many questions, we get into this execution mode. we get into this mode where we keep practicing more and more. And, these are people who are usually hungry for questions. These are the people you'll find on the forums who will go and say, I've done OG, I've done this document, that document, this book, that book. Can you give me more books, right? More books, more questions is not a solution. And these are people, and you have to ask yourself, are you one such person? Have you received in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks a new source, quote unquote? Maybe it is a friend who used a particular material and is no longer has the use for it and has given it to you. Correct? So now what happens? Are extra 200 questions? Chalo, let's practice. Bad approach. Right? So make sure that you're not falling a trap to this thing where, and I've had students who have come and even told me, Arun, in maths, so I ended up, just one second. Yeah. I was just looking at it. Someone wants a link. It's in the email. Okay. So just go to your email. The link is in your email. Okay. If it's not in the email, then I would assume that you should, I would not know how you came to this webinar in the first place. Okay. So it's there in the, so ask yourself, right? Don't take any books. In fact, what I would say, people who score very well on the GMAT are actually very particular about the material they pick. I've had students, one of my students, Apurva, right? 760 on the GMAT, 49 quant, 45 verbal. Okay. And I remember this thing that he told me once. He said, Arun, I have 1 month to prepare. Okay. I want just the essential material for me to prepare. Okay. He says, I went on to forum and there are so many people giving me so many material. I don't want to do any. My smartness lies in not solving. My smartness lies in analyzing. Right? So he said, I want to spend 60-70% of my time analyzing and only about 30-40% solving new questions. Okay. So always keep that in mind. Be very, just once again. So just make sure that you're using your time very judiciously. Okay. So that's not just your time, but also the resources that you have. Use that very judiciously. Okay. So I see a couple of people raising their hands. Okay. I would not be, able to respond. Okay. So in case you have questions, please put it in the Q&A part, and then we will, take it from there. All right. Okay. Sixth point. Again, I have had students come and talk about this word called accuracy, right? And, I've never been able to understand, like, what is this accuracy thing that you're talking about? So, for example, we had someone who won Miss World from India, correct, recently. And if I were to say, okay, can I measure the beauty of people in India based on the number of people who go on to win Miss India or Miss Universe? You'll say, obviously, Arun, that's a wrong metric. How can you measure such a large number, like, the beauty of India? There is a term like that, based on something like that. Same logic behind how well you are doing on the GMAT has nothing to do with your accuracy on the OG. See, OG itself, if you realize, fundamentally is graded from easy to hard. Correct? So when you tell me it's an average is an incorrect metric. It doesn't tell me. I don't know. For example, if you were to tell me that I solved easy questions, I got all of them right. Okay, I got these tough questions and I got all of them wrong. Right? Why did you get them wrong? Okay. Why did you get them wrong? Why did you get them right? So I feel even on the GMAT, if you look at it, all of the questions that you get, so let's just do a math over here. Okay. So if I were to take the GMAT, right, I have in quant, I have 37 questions. Verbal, I have 41 questions. Just let's look at the thing over here, right? Do you know that out of this, not approximately, 9 questions are experimental. And in the case of verbal, 11 questions are experimental. Experimental means we do not know whether your response to that question, whether it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. It will not go towards your final 3-digit GMAT score, correct? What it means is you're left with about 26 questions in the case of quant, and you're left with about 30 questions in the case of verbal, right? Now, I can assure you that pretty much, GMAT algorithm does not take just the number of questions you get right or wrong. If you understand how the adaptive algorithm works, you will realize it is the position of the mistakes, which means GMAT is constantly evaluating you. They are looking at it and saying, is this guy a 760 level or a 600 level? So what will happen there is, once you hit, let's say 600 level, and let's say 600 is where your zone is, correct? Then what will happen is you will just make a few mistakes. When I say few, I'm really saying few, 2 or 3 mistakes. But based on these 2 or 3 mistakes, GMAT will never give you a higher level question. It is going to give you more of questions at a 600 level. And if you are making a few mistakes at a 600 level, chances are you will consistently keep making mistakes at the 600 level, correct? Now let us take another person. Let us say that he gets the questions at a 600 level right. He goes to a 700 level. He goes to a 760 level, correct? Again, I'm simplifying things for you, but you understand what I'm saying. Once he reaches the 760 level, what do you think is going to happen? He also makes a few mistakes. So what GMAT does, GMAT says, I'm not going to give him 800. Let me give him some more questions at 760 level. Now, if the logic were to go right, this guy will also start making a few mistakes at a 760 level. Now, if you look at the total number of questions they got right, you will realize that the 760 level guy got questions which were perhaps a few more questions than the guy who got a 600. Okay, but the huge difference over here is the mistakes that he made were at a 760 level. The mistake that the first guy made was at a 600 level. So there is a huge sea of difference between the kind of mistakes they are making, right? So don't look at the total number of mistakes you've made. That is point number 1. Okay, why I feel accuracy is a wrong metric. Second reason is I see people come and tell me, Arun, I solved 100 questions. I got only 50 of them right. You know what I tell them? I tell them, congratulations. They say, why? I say, well, because if you have analyzed the 50 mistakes that you got wrong, you are now at a better position than when you solve those 100 questions. But they said, but I solved those 100 questions only 2 days ago. I say, congratulations, because in 2 days you already improved if you have analyzed. Okay, so if you have 2 people, one of them solved 100 questions, got 50 right. The other one solved 100 questions, got 70 right. But the guy who got 70 right did not analyze it. He just went through the motions. Then chances are, next time I present them with 100 questions, the first one who analyzed his mistakes can probably get 80 right. Whereas the second person will always be stuck at 70. Okay, so as I've said this earlier, I'm going to kind of reiterate on this. Analyze, analyze, analyze. Okay. If it takes you X minutes to go through a question, see, in the case of quant, the best way to do it is look at the answer, don't look at the solution. Okay. Look at the answer. Okay. The answer is 17.5. I now need to figure out what are the possible ways in which I can get to 17.5. Okay. Don't look at the solution. The moment you look at the solution, no, things become very easy. Correct? But see, in quant, looking at the other answer options, you will not really get to know, right? Like you can't look at an answer choice and say, Acha, 12.5 is also there. Oh, 15 is also there. Or, oh, 22 is also there. Well, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, these are all questions that, you had. But in verbal, okay, let's take a sentence correction question. Even if you got the answer right, even if you know, okay, C for Charlie is the right answer choice, but then also looking at A, looking at B, looking at D, looking at E, looking at all the 4 answer options, okay, we get to learn a potential way in which GMAT has set a trap. We get an insight into the GMAT test setter's mind. we get to know what are the possible rules that can be tested on the GMAT, correct? So it's a treasure trove. So when people come to me and say 100 questions are solved, I say, excellent. Take now, if you've solved 100 questions in 2 days, take at least 3 days to analyze those 100 questions. Do not take on the next set of 100 questions before you're done with your analysis. All right? Okay. So that's the 6th point. 7th point, this is something that I have encountered from students who have taken the test, and what happens is they come back and they kind of tell me that, Arun, I saw easy questions, right? The question though was very easy, but somehow I got a low score. I don't know why I got a 650. I thought I was gunning for a 730. See, as I said, GMAT, the way so I read somewhere, and this is true. So GMAT spends a lot of money creating these questions, correct? They spend up to 2,000. In fact, I have it in one of the later slides. They spend a lot of money creating these, super quality questions. So what happens is that on the GMAT, it is not very easy for you to spot a tough question. In fact, we have solved perhaps some of the questions in the class, in the online course also, right? Very tough questions, but questions that are deceptive, right? GMAT knows that your thinking, okay, will happen in a particular direction. So let me give you a simple example. I'm going to give you a quant example because it is very hard for me to write down a verbal question with 5 answer choices. So let me give you a quant question, okay? So let's say that there is a tank of fish, okay? And in this tank, right, there are 200 fishes. And if I were to say 99% of them are red fish, okay? How many red fish would I need to remove? How many would I need to remove so that the tank contains now 98% red fish? Got the question? There are 200 fish in a tank. 99 are red fish, 99% are red fish. How many would you need to remove in order to make it 98? And what will happen on the GMAT is you'll be given answers, like this, right? You usually have answer options which are, it's from easy to, it's always ascending. So you'll have, let's say, 1, 2, 3, I don't know, 5, and maybe, 100. So when you're given a question like this, okay, so I got one answer, 2, okay. Okay, 2, all right. Quick, whatever you think, right? So let's assume that, okay, 2, 98% should be red, correct? Whatever is left should be 98, okay. Okay, most of you got 2. Okay, someone said 100, most of you but say 2. Excellent. Okay, good. So now let me just show you, if 99% are red fish, okay, out of 200, okay, let's just do a simple math, okay. Can you tell me what number of fish are red fish? So you have 198 out of 200 as red fish, correct? And let's say the other 2 are blue, okay? Now, how many do you need to remove to make it 98? You need to remove 100 red fish. If you remove 100 red fish, there will be 98 red fish, and the total number of fish will become 100. Correct? So the answer really is 100. Correct? Now, why I'm saying this is because a lot of times we will not even look at the number 100. Correct? We will just look at array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we are between those numbers. So a tough GMAT question will end up, not having a, sorry, I just think, yeah, not having a beacon on the top announcing that it's a tough question, correct? And many a times what I've seen is that people don't tend to look at tough GMAT problems, correct? So when they look at it, they tend to see it and say, well, uh, you know, uh, it should be a question that while reading, I should not even be able to understand what it is saying. It should be so tough. Incorrect. Okay, I will tell you this is something that happens, right? I'll give an example. So Manhattan GMAT, for example, if you look at the quant, right? Many of the questions are tough, but they are what I would call as tediously tough. Okay, they are not tough as in tough. They are tedious. They will take you time. They will take you 4 minutes to arrive at the answer. But in the case of GMAT, you will notice that just missing out one value. Array, I had to consider minus half. Data sufficiency problem wrong. Array, I considered both A and B statements together. Hence, I picked C. Again, wrong. Same thing in verbal, right? Array, I looked at parallelism, but I realized that there is a very obvious subject-verb, error over there. So always, what happens is a truly great question will leave you very uncomfortable. That's the beauty of GMAT questions. And these questions you will get in the GMAT prep. Okay, so those who are CrackVerbal students know that you have an advanced document. Make sure you take the advanced document only after you have done the OG verbal review and taken the GMAT prep times at least a couple of times, because these questions would appear in GMAT prep, right? So make sure you take the GMAT prep a bunch of times. Start, at least keep, I would say 3 weeks before your test. Okay, 3 weeks, solve these GMAT prep questions. Okay, very, very important that you get into that zone of understanding what GMAT really tests you on. Okay, number 8. GMAT, if you were to ask me, anybody, all of you, the 90 people today, if I were to give you a single question, okay, and if I were to give you let's say 2 minutes, and if I were to say your ability is dependent on your solving this one question, trust me, majority of you will be able to do that. Majority of you will be able to solve isolated questions. The problem really is on the test, what you have to understand is that there is this resource called mental energy, right? So this is something that I've spoken about in the class and in the online course. So this is the same thing. In fact, you might want to Google for this term. It is called decision fatigue. So I don't know if you have heard of this term, but it's called decision fatigue. Okay, just Google for it. So what decision fatigue says is that your brain, after a point, is not able to process as efficiently and as effectively just because you have used up your brain juice. Okay, I'm going to use this word brain juice, okay, because all of us have this brain juice. When we start our day early in the morning, right, we are fresh and bright and we are able to attack any problem. But how many of you have noticed, and it happens to me a lot, 5:30 in the evening, okay, I've gone through the whole day, I've done a ton of work, and then someone comes and says, hey, you got a quick minute? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure, tell me. And then he gives me this problem statement, and I'm like, you know what, dude, my brain right now is a little fried, so can we talk about this tomorrow? If you have caught yourself saying something like that, it means you have used up your brain juice, right? You've used up your brain stamina, your brain power. It's like a mobile battery, correct? When you start your day, it's 100%, right? Then you're on 4G, then you're on, YouTube, then you're on WhatsApp. You're like using up a lot of your battery. By the time it becomes like 12:30, you are down to 50%. By the time you're at 3:34, it's down to 20%. And then 5:36, then you have to book the cab, okay? Uber, Ola. Suddenly you realize, hey man, I'm low on battery. Correct? How many of you go and charge it in the evening just because you know that it's run out of battery? Same thing on the GMAT. Okay, you have to be very conscious the way you practice. Okay, to a large extent, I feel taking practice tests is important because you want to build your mental stamina also. In fact, while studying also, my suggestion is to keep not now, maybe when you start, it's okay, but towards the end, make sure your study sessions themselves are 2 hours, 2.5 hours. and you're doing it in one sitting. So that means your brain is conditioned to essentially work with that load. And trust me, the mental stamina is similar to any other stamina. It's like running. If I were to run on day one, and if I were to run 5 kilometers, I'll drop dead. Correct? But if I were to start 200 meters, 500 meters, 1 kilometer, 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers, if I go gradually, if I progress gradually, then my mental stamina definitely is going to go up. Right? So that's the deal on mental stamina. The ninth one coming up, okay, which is planning your study sessions. Okay. Now, what I've seen is, and the analogy I have is most diet plans are given up while reading the dessert menu, right? If you ever dieted in your life, it's very easy to look at lousy food and say, well, I'm on a diet, correct? Similarly, what happens is in GMAT also, when you have easy days, it is very easy for you to say, oh, I want to study and, I'm going to take the GMAT. You have 1 or 2 bad days. That's what I've noticed. Just 1 or 2 bad days, people give up. People give up without putting a fight. Okay. So my take to you would be, you have to be diligent. GMAT is diligence. 2 to 3 months, you need to invest. Okay. You want to take the GMAT just once. You want to score as high as possible. And remember, when I say as high as possible, in some cases it could be 760, some cases it could be 620, it could be 700, it could be 680, 730, whatever you think. See, this is what I tell my students. When you take the test, when you see that final number flashing on your screen, correct? Ask yourself very honestly, do you think you gave it your 100%? If you feel you gave it your 100%, correct? It's pointless to live in the speculative world, saying, "Arey, no, I have to take a GMAT and score higher." No. If you think I got whatever score with the effort that I put in, it's fine. So make sure that for the next 2 to 3 months, I don't know, are you a morning person or an evening person? I am a late evening person. I'm not a morning person. Okay. I can't wake up at 4 o'clock. I can't wake up at 5 o'clock, right? I sleep pretty late. So in fact, I don't sleep like very late, but I usually sleep like maybe 1 a.m. and I wake up at 8 a.m. So 7 hours of sleep is good for me. But if you want me to focus, I would rather pick 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Okay, 2 hours, I think I'll do a great job. Then for me to wake up at 5 o'clock and do it from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. Right? So make sure that you understand your body clock. There is no such thing as a right time to study for the GMAT. People come and say, oh, you should study in the morning. It's BS. It's not true. If you are a late evening person, you can study late in the evening. Come back from work, take a shower, watch TV, have dinner, do whatever else you want to do. 11 o'clock, shut yourself into the room, start studying. If you're an early morning person, wake up at 4:35. Let's say you wake up at 4:30. Wake up at 4:30. Don't start studying in your pajamas, sipping your cup of coffee. Take a shower. Do your morning, stuff. Maybe want to do yoga. Maybe want to drink tea, coffee. Get into your work clothes. That's actually a fantastic way to bring focus. Get into your work clothes. Keep your laptop bag ready. Right? So everything is set. The only thing that is stopping you is really, sitting down and studying. And at that point, at let's say 8:30, 5 o'clock, sit down and study for 2 hours. Right? And one thing, internet, okay, internet, mobile. So I just feel that people start off with the best intentions in their heart. Correct. If you really look at people, right, they will start off, they will always say, and this is usually how the progression happens. Okay. So what will happen is they'll start off and they will solve AC question. Okay. Then what will happen is they will try to check explanation online. Right. Then they go to GMAT Club. GMAT Club, this guy will talk about this answer, but also you'll start reading this debrief, right? This debrief which says 770 with 2 weeks prep. Correct. The moment you look at it, you say, wow, this guy has kind of got something by which he was able to get 770 in 2 weeks. Then what happens? He will give you a link saying, download this book. Okay. Or he will say, watch this video on YouTube. Correct. The moment you go there, you start seeing something else on YouTube. Okay. And before you realize you're watching, cat videos, right? Of some funny videos. And before you realize you're on Facebook. Right? So it's a vicious circle, right? We always start with the best of our intentions, correct? But somehow we end up landing at a place where we don't want to be, right? So it's very important that you really focus on making sure that you are sitting down to study. I would say, ask your roommate to perhaps even unplug the internet and not give you the Wi-Fi password. Okay, sit down with a book, right? That's the most basic of things. Right. So last one is learning from the wrong stuff, right? I think, the biggest bane is the internet. If you ask me, 10 years ago, test prep companies were not as many as you have right now. Okay. And I agree that, maybe there wasn't enough material to practice from, but in some sense, it was a good thing. Because what happened is people valued whatever material they had. So I will tell you in 2005, which is about 12 years ago, there was just one book, there was just OG 10th edition when I got into GMAT preparation, right? So just with one work with 10th edition, all the practice that you needed was available right over there, correct? But now what has happened is people have started practicing from so many different material. And let me tell you, nothing compares to the official material provided by GMAT. Okay. In fact, it was somewhere I had read, and it was GMAT's own figure that they spend up to $2,000 on a single question. $2,000. Just think about it. So they get a lot of data from you. Okay. They know that if there is a particular question, it should be culturally neutral. It should be gender agnostic. It should actually, touch upon these very specific areas of standardized test preparation. But what happens when a lot of this, a lot of test companies, they just create questions that are they just give like $20. And I know this because, especially quant questions, they give it to people in Eastern Europe, and they get these questions created. But really, it is nowhere close to the GMAT material. Okay. The other problem is a lot of times what I've seen is people remarket the same stuff. For example, there is a test called the LSAT. Okay. And, there is this book for LSAT, and many companies, what they do is they end up taking the LSAT material and they just change the name and call it GMAT CR questions. So when you end up looking at the wrong type of questions, see, you have to understand GMAT is a standardized test, correct? What it means is there is very little that it can do. A GMAT test setter cannot wake up one day in the morning and he cannot say, oh, today I'm going to test them on this concept or that concept, correct? He has a framework. He has to live within that framework. But all these questions that you see online, GMAT Club, Beat the GMAT, a lot of these forums, many of these questions are not authentic. In fact, I would say many of them, even the techniques, I've seen a lot of techniques that people say. For example, one technique that I've heard people say is when you look at a particular question, you need to be able to think of what the answer is, correct? Now, I think it's virtually impossible for me to think of what the answer is in a CR question before I look at the answer options. So yes, in our class, in our online course, I do mention that you should have a general sense of the direction that you need to move in, correct? But I wouldn't really waste time trying to figure out what the answer is. Or let's take reading comprehension. For some odd reason, I have had students come and tell me, oh, I went to this particular place and they told me that you have to take each paragraph and you have to write exactly what that entire paragraph is saying in a few words of your own. It's impossible. How can you write in a few words an entire paragraph? And chances are when you're reading it for the first time, you don't want to invest that much time and effort, correct? So my take is, if you're using a technique currently and it's not working for you, ask yourself, right? Is this the right technique? correct? And try to use it on official questions. See, right now, if you look at the official questions that are available, right? I'm just telling you what is available in the market at this point, correct? You have the OG, okay? Plus you have the verbal review and the quant review. And then on top of that, you have something called as GMAT pack, right? Plus at CrackVerbal, we also give retired GMAT prep questions, right? Now, if you were to look at it, there is retired and current GMAT prep questions, right? If you look at it, all these sources to put together will give you upwards of 3,500 questions. And if 3,500 questions cannot save you, 35,000 questions also cannot save you. Okay, so you need to be very, very sure what is it that you're getting into. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say as the 10 points. So just to kind of reiterate the points that I wanted to say, the first thing that we spoke about, by the way, the questions that you're putting over here, Vijay and all of this, I would not have access into this. So I'm going to go and look at the questions that are currently in the Q&A section. So make sure you put it into the Q&A section. All right. So just to kind of summarize, first, remember, don't try to mug up rules. It's not a test of skill alone. Number two, it is not a test of pure intelligence. I'm not saying don't learn the rules. Obviously, GMAT is not a bag of tricks. You need to learn what are the common traps GMAT has set for you. Make sure that your timing strategy on the GMAT is well thought out. That is one of the reasons why people end up screwing up their test. Know when to make guesses. Learn to differentiate between blind guesses, which are used to save time, and educated guesses where you have to have a upper cutoff, a point where you give up rather than purely guess. Fifth, don't try to use this brute force where you're just sitting and solving questions, right? If you don't analyze questions properly, you can sit with, let's say, RS Agarwal, right? Bank PO exam, right? You solve 100 questions. Length is equal to 5, breadth is equal to 3. What is the area of rectangle? Now, second question will be length is equal to 10, breadth is equal to 5. What is the area of rectangle? See, you can solve 50,000 questions also, but it will never improve your scores, correct? Then don't look at accuracy, look at the underlying difficulty of the question. Remember, this is a weighted average problem, correct? So we cannot look at average. We have to look at weighted average. Which are the questions you are getting wrong, rather than looking at the total number of mistakes that you have made. Number 7, tough questions need not be tough because they are tedious. Many a times, GMAT could give you questions that are very tough, but on the face of it, looks very easy. These are deceptive questions. You should be careful about them. Then we spoke about how it is important to build your mental stamina on the GMAT. This is not like a one-off question that you're trying to solve. Remember, decision fatigue will kick in. Make sure you conserve your mental energy, right, for the test, which is going to be, a pretty long one. And don't rely only on weekends. This is not a hit or miss policy. Sit down, make sure that you make your study sessions count. If you're a morning person, wake up early, study for 2 hours. If you're a late evening person, wait till the end of the day, study for 2 hours. Okay, and make sure you're actually studying and not getting defocused on forums and watching, random stuff. And finally, make sure you pick only the official material. OG, verbal review, quant review. Along with that, make sure that you pick questions from the GMAT prep, retired GMAT prep questions. There is also GMAT pack, about 3,500 different questions, more than enough for you to do well on the GMAT. All right. Okay, so now let me get to the questions that I have from people. So Nilay Poddar, 45 to 60 would be question number 22 to 36, kind of, right? So that is more of, what is 22 to 36? No, you are giving yourself, why would you solve 14 questions in 15 minutes? I didn't get the question, Niloy. Okay, I didn't get what you're saying. Red beacon means, you know, this politicians and ministers, no, when they come, there is a car that, you know, makes that siren sounds, no, and people know, array, VIP is coming, correct? Similarly, when a tough question comes, it does not announce itself. It will come, you know, in like a, you know, wearing plain clothes. Okay. Anonymous person has asked, what is the best way to order the exam? Quant, verbal, IR, Q, or what? See, it depends on you. I have had students who have come and told me, Arun, when I start with verbal or quant, I have a lot of inertia which is not letting me move forward. So I want to do IR and AWA before I get into verbal and quant. I've had students tell me that, right? So I would say that is something completely dependent on you. I would probably take a couple of tests, check for myself how I'm doing before I come to what works best for me, correct? So really, it's something that is very person dependent. Arijit had a question which is how to maintain point number 9 where you're working in a development IT. See, I know, Arijit, it's not an easy job, correct? But think about it. This year, will 900 people get into Harvard Business School? Just think about it. These 900 people who will get admission in 2018 to Harvard Business School, right, will almost all of them score obscenely high GMAT scores? Let me tell you, the answer is yes. Let me ask you the third question. These people who are applying to Harvard Business School and who are making it, what kind of jobs do you think they are on? Do you think they are unemployed? I'm pretty sure they are working 14 hours a day. In fact, one of the things that a B school is looking for is this person able to manage a workload along with the GMAT, right? They expect you to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? You cannot just say, oh, well, you know, too much at work. Everybody is going through your problem, Arijit. This is really a test of your strength. Okay, so you need to focus, you need to do it. I wish there is an easier answer to it. Ria asked this question. I've finished doing the OG, no other book, and I've already started with this thing. Will take up test starting? Is this, yeah, right approach, Ria. You're on the right track. Vijay, 2 to 3 months prep from now, I can miss round 2. Can I write the test in first week of Jan? You know what? If take the GMAT when you're ready, Vijay. If you say that, Arun, if I take the test on December 15th, I will get a 650. If I take it on Jan 15th, I'll get a 750. I would say take it on Jan 15th. Okay. Take the test once when you're best prepared. If you feel that taking it now will not give you the best scores, then please don't take it. So 1 month or 2 month or 3 month is something that is completely dependent on you. Ria, take the GMAT pack after you're done OG and verbal review. Gaurav, thanks for the question. You're saying I'm hitting 700 at the moment. Target is 750 plus. Thinking, practicing, and timing. I need to improve. Need tips. Very, very broad question, Gaurav. Right? So it's like you are coming and telling me I'm scoring 700. How to score a 750? Trust me, if I could condense, the answer in, let's say, 30 seconds, and I could give it to you, right? I would have done it. It is not that way. The answer lies with you. The person who's going to score a 750 is actually within the body of Gaurav Lakhani. Okay, it's up to you to make sure that you are able to get that person come out on the day of the test, for which you need to do a lot of analysis. In fact, one of the things that I told you is that the mistake Indians do is they don't analyze, introspect. The answer does not lie outside. Don't try to externalize it. There is no book, there is no material which is going to magically help you get a 750. All of you are doing the right things. The very fact that you're attending today's webinar tells me that you're focused, correct? Tells me that you're thinking in the right direction. But it requires introspection. It requires you to get into the details, right? To see where the improvement has to happen. Mohit said, you said that GMAT sent someone question 600. This is where the experimental questions come in, Mohit. So what GMAT does is, when it gives you the experimental questions, it is actually trying to gauge the level of the question. So GMAT has a very good sense of knowing where it lies. For a person who did not take maths in 11th and 12th, how long will it take? You know what? GMAT maths is not even 11th and 12th standard maths. Okay, all the differential calculus and all that things you learned, integration and all that, not even tested on the GMAT. Correct? So my take, it is 8th standard level. The problem that I've seen with people who did not take maths is they tend to be very negative towards quant, right? So it's very important that you have a very open mindset. Don't have a closed mindset towards studying for the quant. It's easy stuff. You will be able to do it, okay? Venkat Kishore asked, I was able to solve 1 or 2 for 12 out of 14. Again, you're going back to accuracy, right? So my take is 30 minutes to solve 14 questions is fine, but why did you go down and solve 11 questions in 15 minutes? If I were to solve 11 questions in 15 minutes, I will not even get 4. Why are you creating all these weird timings by yourself? Okay. When you're looking at test mode, see, if a question can be solved in 20 minutes, 2 minutes, giving yourself 3 minutes is not going to improve your accuracy by a great deal. But if you give yourself just 1 minute, your accuracy is going to plummet. Correct? So nowhere have I ever said that you have to solve 11 questions in 15 minutes, right? So I just feel you have to pick, pick a number like 20 minutes, right? And see how you do in 20 minutes. Don't pick these random numbers by yourself. Himanshu, this is beyond the scope of this webinar today, scaled scores and actual scores. I've written a blog on this called GMAT Scores Demystified. I think that's what the name is. GMAT Scoring Demystified. Let me just check if, I think I have a blog on this. So let me just. So what I'll do is I'll just post it on the chat window itself so that everyone is able to get this. Thanks, Sandeep, for your kind words. All right, Himanshu, I shared it on the chat window. Have a look at it. I thought so too. Should be 7 questions. Correct. So that's what I said. No, 7 questions for 15 minutes. I don't know where the confusion was. 7 questions for 15 minutes. Yeah, correct. Can you come again on the red quant question? Gayatri, go back. This video recording is available on the same link that you have. So just go fast forward and try to look at the problem. You'll realize why the answer is 100. How does GMAT know? Mohit, I answered this question. They get to know this from the practice, from the dummy questions mock in the tests, the questions that don't go towards the 5, the GMAT this. Ria, I just said do it after OG and verbal review. Okay, I'm just going to take the last couple of questions and then we're going to close the webinar. It's already 12 o'clock, so it's time. What is the impact of the score? Shailesh, my question is, why do you want to even consider that, right? Why do you want to even consider what will happen if you don't finish the test? It's a hypothetical question that people like Arun Jagannathan should worry. It is not meant for a person like Shailesh to worry. For Shailesh, he should look at solving the questions in 75 minutes. Correct? Sandeep, question is referring to point number 8. Does giving breast to brain for 2 minutes at the 37th minute in each section have a positive impact? Sandeep, I'll tell you what will happen. You can't really be rested. On the GMAT, if you think that I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to relax, your brain will not let you relax. And some amount of adrenaline that is rushing through your veins is actually good, because that means you are in a fighting mode. Correct? So I don't think in that fighting mode, when you're all gunned up and geared to take the test, you would really be able to, sit and relax for 2 minutes. What could be a typical method to analyze? Typical method, there is nothing like a typical method, Rakesh. Just look at the questions that you have made wrong, that you have got right. Ask yourself, what are the possible other reasons why I could have eliminated? Was the reasoning I gave a good enough reasoning? Correct? And for questions that you got wrong, you always ask yourself, what is wrong about the right answer option? What was I thinking that was wrong about the right answer option? Okay. And what was seemingly right about the wrong answer option that I picked? When you start focusing on that question, you will be able to get your answer. Okay. Ashish, I scored 700, 730, scored 620. Ashish, again, take the ESR report. Maybe, you can show it to someone at CrackVerbal or to the prep team. We will help you. But the answer really could be a lot of factors that on the day of the test were different from the way it was in practice. For example, you did not take IR in AWA, or maybe you ended up being a little more relaxed. On the day of the test, you were more stressed. So a bunch of reasons why things could have gone wrong. Okay. So the last question I'm going to take is Fahim Savant's question. Okay. I'm not going to be taking any more question. So please, let's just wrap it up. Otherwise, we'll just keep going. I am weak on verbal, scoring 15-20, but quant 45-48. Anonymous attendee, you're asking me a question which is more like a holy grail. In fact, this is exactly the mistake that I'm telling Indians make. If you are going to have that attitude of saying that I'm weak in verbal, tell me what is going to fix the problem. You'll never be able to fix the problem, right? You need to start digging deep. You need to look at it and say, if I'm applying to a top B school, they expect me to figure out things on my own. I can't go to my boss and tell me what the solution is. I need to figure out the solution myself, right? So analyze, dig deep, and I'm pretty sure you'll find the answer. Places like CrackVerbal, we can help you analyze it, correct? But I cannot tell you what the answer is. If I had the answer to the question, and everyone scores a 750, 760, trust me, I would not be sitting here taking a webinar. Right? I will just say, meet me in private, give me 1 crore, I'll tell you what it takes to score a 760. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer. Nobody in the world has an answer, correct? So you need to stop externalizing the problem, internalize it, right? One more question that I have is, I've completed OG, GMAT prep mocks, getting 620, 730, last only 570. Same thing, what do I do? I've finished all material, official questions. If you're a CrackVerbal student, these are all specific questions that you should be checking with the prep team, right? The reason Aditya, Shivranjani are there is to help you, correct? Make sure you utilize that, the resource they have, right? Talk to them, explain to them, walk them through. Don't ask it in a random webinar, right? Because in a webinar, I'm just asking questions. I'm going to go through it very fast. This is something that is impacting your life, right? Something that impacts your performance and something that impacts your scholarships, something that impacts your admission to schools. It is a lot more important than putting it onto a question at the end of a webinar, right? So you need to make sure you sit with the team, talk to them, give them data points, correct? Vidhi asked, GMAT prep full length test, those some questions which are from retired repeat. There is no way out, Vidhi. I wish there is an answer to this. There is no way out. Somapal, Soma asked this question to Shivranjani. Okay, I think the answer is yes. Okay, but really, if you ask me possibility, I would say yes. Is it possible? Yes. Kashif, good question. I think a lot of people have this problem. So what I would say is maybe you want to wait till you start hitting maybe a 700. Okay, so that you start getting a little bit confidence onto how to do it. Okay, and that's really the way to go. Okay, Rishi, I take your feedback. I will take a session on RC in the month of December. Himanshu, again, the GMAT prep questions is what I would have. Okay, and that's what I would suggest for the next 20 days. Thank you, Nilay, for your comment. Again, Vijay, you go back to what I said, right? This is precisely the problem that I said Indians make. We think that there is, you know what, I just feel that this whole webinar, okay, I've been trying to prove a point and you just disproved it. It is not the number of hours that you're going to study. This is an Indian mentality. Get rid of it, correct? It is about your ability to understand, analyze. They are testing your management capability. Okay, this is not an 8th standard exam that we have to mug up something and learn from it. Correct? So, Mayank, as I said, official material includes OG, verbal review, GMAT pack, advanced document. If you have done all of it, go back and analyze it. It tells me if you're not improving, it tells me that you have not analyzed it properly. Go back and analyze each of those 3,500 questions. I'll ask you 5 questions out of those. If you're able to answer it well, I'm pretty sure you'll do well on the GMAT. Fahim, I would say no more than 1 to 2 hours a day. I would say about 3 months is the max outer limit. Okay, 3 months is what I would say. Okay, yeah, I will be doing a session on both RC and CR. Thanks a lot for your feedback. I will take that into account, and thanks a lot. It was great, giving you my thoughts on this, and I hope you like this webinar. If so, please, if you are part of any online forums, just go ahead and let your friends know about this webinar. You can give them this link if you think it would be useful, if you are on GMAT Club or Be the GMAT, and if you want to post this link so that people get to know this, I'd be more than happy for you to do so. All right. So thanks a lot for your time, and I hope to see you very soon in another webinar. Right.